Hi, I'm Aaron Brooker, agronomist for Michigan and Northern Indiana. Today I wanted to talk about tar spot. There's been a lot of buzz about this disease for the last few weeks. They started finding it out west fairly early on, and now we've started to see a couple dots on the map show up down in northwest Indiana, starting to get a little closer to home here, and guys have been asking a lot of questions, rightfully so, about if they should be worried about this disease, if we've been seeing it up here further north in Michigan, and what we're going to do to manage this disease if it comes in. So the good news is nothing has really changed in the last couple years. So if you've been listening over the last couple years to our management guidelines, things really haven't changed. Fortunately, we didn't have a lot of infection last year until later in the season. That meant that we didn't get to learn very much about this disease and how we're going to manage it though. So it was a good thing for you all, but we really didn't change much in terms of our management practices. So what are those management guidelines for tar spot? First of all, we're going to start with scouting for the disease. So there's been some buzz about just spraying some of these long residual type fungicide products and just spray them early, and that'll carry us through the season regardless of if we see that tar spot out there. Sometimes these recommendations are prior to tassel, and we haven't seen as good of return on investment with that pre-tassel application. So if you look at our PFR data, it's really that R1 time frame that we get our highest application. Before and after that, we do see lower return on investment with a fungicide application. The other problem with going too early is if tar spot comes in a little bit later, we might be setting ourselves up to have that disease pressure. We might see some yield loss, or we might have to make a second application, which we want to try to avoid if possible. So get out there and scout. Starting now, this corn behind me is just before tassel. Or right at tassel. It's a good time to get out there and scout. That's when we've seen this disease really start to come in most years. So we want to get out and scout for this disease right about now and see if it's out there. Target those most susceptible hybrids first. So those are the hybrids that are going to be most likely to show this disease, and that's where you're gonna save yourself some time than just going out to every field. Target those those products with higher disease susceptibility. You should have those available. All of Beck's hybrids have ratings, and you should have those available from other companies as well. So save yourself some time there and start with those products. Now, if you see tar spot and we're at that R1 time frame, that's a great time to just go ahead and make that application. We see high profitability in PFR, and then we also see that, that also gives us a chance to knock that disease back as it's getting started. But what if we don't see disease yet? So the recommendation there is to just go back out about once a week and just monitor for disease in that field, disease progress in that field. Once we see disease, we can go ahead and make that application. So if we start at R1 time frame, we can go out to about that R3 time frame. Once we get to R3, and if we don't see disease at that point, that's the time I'm going to recommend making that fungicide application if we're going to go ahead and make it from a plant health standpoint, increasing yields and seeing those benefits from that fungicide regardless of disease pressure. You can see with our data, once we get to R3 and a little bit past, we really do start to lose profitability, but there's still a little bit of profit there to be made, and especially if tar spot does come in, we'll still protect a little bit of yield there. Now, what about which product do we use? So we get this question a lot, and I don't really care what product we use, but we want to use something with multiple modes of action and make sure those modes of action are actually targeted toward tar spot. So I'll link to a resource from the Crop Protection Network that's going to dive into modes of action and their targeted diseases, but make sure we're not getting that really expensive 3 mode of action product, and that 3rd mode of action may not really be helping us with control of tar spot if that's our goal. It might still be a really good product, we still could make money on it, but we may not need that 3rd mode of action sometimes. So take a look at that as you're making those decisions as well. As always, we still want to remember our best practices as we think about making fungicide applications. Those are going to be things like spraying in the morning when there's dew on the leaves. That'll help kind of give us that nice coverage over the leaves. Spraying at 15 to 20 gallons per acre. So I typically recommend that 20 gallons per acre if possible if we're using that ground rig to make sure we're getting good coverage over the leaves. That's going to be especially important with that fungicide application in the absence of disease pressure. If we do have disease pressure, any way we can get over that field is going to be helpful against managing that disease. So if we've got to use that airplane, if we've got to use a ground rig, it doesn't really matter which one we're using. Make sure we get a fungicide out on that crop. And then make sure that we're spraying using those smallest droplet sizes as possible, those flat fans, nothing like a TTI or anything like that that's going to have large droplets. Again, we want to get that good coverage. So spraying in the morning, 15 to 20 gallons per acre. Those are going to be a couple of keys to help us improve the efficacy and improve the ROI on that fungicide application. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to your local Beck's representative or myself, and we'll be happy to help. Thank you.